326 BC, after nearly 10 years of conquest, Alexander the Great had never lost a battle. With around 40,000 battle-hardened veterans, he had destroyed the Persian Empire, conquered Egypt, and marched farther east than any Greek army in history. But in India, he faced a different kind of enemy. King Porus, a powerful ruler of northern India, commanding a massive force. Over 30,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, hundreds of war chariots, and more than 200 war elephants, towering beasts armored for battle, capable of crushing cavalry and shattering entire formations. Porus also held the high ground across the flooded Hydaspes River. Alexander's army was experienced, undefeated, but smaller, and facing war elephants for the first time. If Alexander won, he would open the gateway into India, expand his empire farther east, and prove his army could defeat even the most terrifying weapons of war. His reputation, already legendary, would become unstoppable. But if he failed, his greatest campaign would end here, against King Porus at the Hydaspes River. Late 327 BC, news of Alexander's advance spread across northern India. The Persian Empire had fallen, Darius III had been defeated, Central Asia had been conquered, and now, Alexander the Great was moving toward India. For nearly 10 years, Alexander had fought continuously. His soldiers were veterans of some of the most difficult campaigns in history. They had crossed deserts in Persia, climbed the mountains of Afghanistan, fought guerrilla wars in Bactria and Sogdiana, and defeated armies larger than their own. By this time, Alexander's army had become one of the most experienced fighting forces in the world. But in northern India, a powerful ruler was preparing, King Porus. Porus ruled the Paurava kingdom, a strong regional power located between the Hydaspes and Ancient rivers. Porus had ruled for years and maintained a standing army. His kingdom was wealthy, fertile, and capable of supporting large numbers of troops. When news of Alexander's invasion arrived, Porus began expanding his forces immediately. Late 327 BC, recruitment began across the kingdom. Local nobles brought their warriors, village leaders sent trained fighters, experienced soldiers from previous regional wars were recalled. Porus began forming a massive army. By early 326 BC, Porus had gathered approximately 30,000 infantry. These soldiers were trained for defensive warfare. They practiced holding formation against cavalry charges. They wielded with long spears, large shields, and curved swords. Some infantry were heavily armored, others were light infantry, trained for mobility. Behind them stood thousands of archers. Indian longbows were powerful and required strength to use. Archers trained to fire in coordinated volleys. Their purpose, weaken enemy formations before close combat. Porus also strengthened his cavalry. Around 4,000 mounted warriors. These cavalry units trained for fast maneuvering. They practiced flanking attacks and hit-and-run tactics. Porus also prepared around 300 war chariots. Each chariot carried archers and drivers. Chariots were used for speed, harassment, and battlefield mobility. But Porus's greatest strength remained his war elephants. More than 200 elephants, massive animals, some over 9 feet tall, each elephant armored for battle. Handlers trained elephants for months. They exposed them to noise, weapons, and simulated combat. Elephants practiced charging forward, breaking infantry formations, crushing cavalry. Each elephant carried multiple soldiers, archers, javelin throwers, and commanders. The elephants became moving towers on the battlefield. Their psychological impact was enormous. Many horses had never seen elephants. They often panicked. Porus understood this advantage. For months, Porus drilled his entire army together. Infantry, cavalry, chariots, and elephants. The goal? Coordination. a unified army capable of facing Alexander. Early summer, 326 BC. Alexander's army reached the Hydaspes River and stopped. For the first time in years, the undefeated army hesitated. Days of monsoon rain had transformed the river. The Hydaspes was no longer just a river. It had become a barrier. The water surged violently. The current pulled everything downstream. The banks were soaked with mud, every step unstable. Heavy infantry struggled to stand. Cavalry horses slipped near the edge. Crossing in daylight would be suicide. Across the river, King Porus waited. His army stretched along the riverbank. More than 200 war elephants stood like silent giants, each one towering above men and horses, their presence alone intimidating. Behind them, thousands of infantry. Archers ready, cavalry prepared to charge. Porus was confident. He believed the river itself would defeat Alexander. Alexander studied the enemy carefully. He watched the elephants. He noticed how they shifted positions. He measured how quickly Porus reacted. He watched and waited. Days passed. Rain continued. Mud deepened. Alexander's soldiers grew tired. Supplies became harder to manage. The river showed no signs of calming. But Alexander remained patient. Then, the deception began. Every day, Alexander moved his troops along the river, sometimes north, sometimes south. Campfires appeared at different locations. Drums echoed through the night. Trumpets sounded before dawn. Porus reacted every time. His elephants marched back and forth. His infantry followed. His cavalry remained alert. But this went on. For days, then weeks. Porus's soldiers grew exhausted, standing in rain, marching through mud, watching constantly. Gradually, their alertness faded. Alexander noticed the change. Reaction times slowed. Some units responded later. Small gaps appeared along the river. Alexander knew this was his chance. He sent scouts upstream. Quietly, cautiously, they searched through trees and rough terrain. Eventually, they found a hidden crossing, far upstream, about 17 miles away. The river curved around a wooded island. The island split the current. Trees covered movement. Darkness would conceal them. Alexander made his decision, but the crossing would still be dangerous. Alexander divided his army. Craterus remained behind. With thousands of troops, their role, deception. Maintain fires, create noise, move cavalry visibly. Convince Porus the army remained. Meanwhile, Alexander prepared 11,000 elite soldiers, companion cavalry, light infantry, selected phalanx units, veterans of years of war. Then, the storm came. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed across the river. Rain fell heavily. Alexander saw his opportunity. Under darkness, he began the march. The soldiers moved silently. Mud slowed every step. Equipment grew heavier with rain. Some soldiers slipped. Others helped them stand. The march lasted for hours. The storm intensified. Wind howled across the plains. Finally, they reached the crossing point. Boats were prepared, rafts assembled. Some soldiers stepped into the water. The river was colder than expected. The current pushed hard. Horses struggled to swim. Men held onto ropes. Some nearly lost balance. Water reached their chests. Some soldiers were swept downstream before being rescued. The crossing took time. Every moment dangerous. Alexander crossed with the first wave, standing in water, encouraging his men, refusing to retreat. Slowly, the army reached the opposite bank, exhausted, wet, but alive. At dawn, Alexander stood on Indian soil. The crossing had succeeded. Porus had not yet realized, but soon he would, and the battle would begin. Dawn, 326 BC. The storm had passed, but the battlefield remained soaked. Mist hovered above the plains near the Hydaspes River. Alexander's army had just crossed. His soldiers were exhausted, their armor soaked with rain, their shields heavy with water, their horses breathing heavily after swimming the river. They had barely formed ranks when scouts returned. Enemy movement, dust rising in the distance, cavalry approaching fast. Porus had discovered the crossing, but instead of committing his full army, he sent a rapid strike force. Led by his son, around 2,000 cavalry and approximately 120 war chariots, Porus's son moved quickly. He intended to strike before Alexander could stabilize. Alexander immediately understood the danger. His infantry had not yet formed the phalanx. Some soldiers were still regrouping, others were adjusting equipment. If Porus's son attacked now, Alexander's army could collapse. Alexander made a rapid decision. He would attack first. He ordered the companion cavalry forward. Light cavalry moved to support. Alexander personally rode to the front. His cavalry began to accelerate. Porus's son's cavalry charged at the same time. Both forces moved rapidly across wet ground. But the muddy terrain began affecting the Indian chariots. Wheels sank into soft earth. Movement slowed. Formation became uneven. Alexander noticed immediately. He ordered a sudden flanking maneuver. Companion cavalry shifted right. Light cavalry moved left. They aimed to surround the enemy. Alexander led the charge himself. The Macedonian cavalry struck the right flank of Porus's son's army. The attack was sudden, fast, aggressive. Indian cavalry attempted to respond, but their formation was already disrupted. Alexander pressed the advantage. He ordered a second wave. More cavalry joined the attack. The Macedonian cavalry circled the enemy. Porus's son's troops were now surrounded. The chariots struggled to maneuver. Some overturned in mud. Others became stuck. Archers could not fire effectively. Alexander ordered a direct charge. Companion cavalry accelerated again. They crashed into the center of the Indian cavalry. Spears struck. Swords clashed. Horses collided. Mud and dust filled the air. Porus's son attempted to rally his troops. He led a countercharge, but Alexander anticipated this. He ordered light cavalry to strike the rear. The Indian cavalry now faced attacks from multiple directions. Panic began spreading. Alexander saw the moment. He ordered a final push. The companion cavalry surged forward. The Indian formation broke. Porus's son's guards fought fiercely. But they were outnumbered. Porus's son was killed during the fighting. Once their commander fell, the Indian cavalry collapsed. Some fled. Others surrendered. Chariots were abandoned across the muddy field. The battlefield fell silent. Alexander had secured his position. His troops began reorganizing. But he knew the main battle was still coming. Across the plains, King Porus was preparing. The clash between two kings was about to begin. Morning, 326 BC, after the death of his son. King Porus understood the gravity of the situation. Alexander had crossed the river. The battle could no longer be avoided. Porus gathered his full army. Slowly, the Indian army advanced across the muddy plains. At the front, the war elephants, more than 200 towering beasts, each armored, each carrying archers and spear throwers. Their footsteps shook the wet ground. Behind them, thousands of infantry, archers positioned between the elephants, spearmen ready for close combat. Cavalry units protected both flanks. Porus himself rode atop a massive elephant. He stood tall, calm, unmoving. From across the battlefield, Alexander could see him. Two kings, now facing each other. Alexander studied the formation carefully. He understood the danger immediately. If the elephants broke his line, the battle would be lost. If his cavalry panicked, the army could collapse. Alexander needed to break Porus's formation, piece by piece. He repositioned his forces. His infantry formed the phalanx. Long sarissas pointed forward. Light infantry moved between the gaps. Archers prepared behind. Alexander moved his cavalry to both wings. He planned to stretch Porus's army, then strike where the line weakened. Alexander raised his hand. The cavalry began to move. The Macedonian horsemen advanced quickly. They targeted Porus's left flank. Porus responded immediately. Indian cavalry moved forward. The two sides collided. Mud sprayed as horses charged. Spears struck. Shields shattered. Alexander then ordered another maneuver. Light cavalry swept around the flank. Porus's cavalry was forced to reposition. Alexander attacked again. Repeated strikes, fast movement, relentless pressure. Porus's cavalry began to struggle. Slowly, the Indian flank began to weaken. Alexander saw the moment. He ordered his phalanx forward. The Macedonian infantry advanced, step by step, carefully. The elephants began to move. Massive beasts charged forward. The ground trembled. Some Macedonian soldiers hesitated, but Alexander rode forward. Encouraging his troops, the phalanx held. Long spears struck the elephants. Light infantry threw javelins. Archers fired arrows into the advancing animals. The elephants became agitated. Some turned sideways. Some attacked randomly. Some trampled their own infantry. Chaos spread across the battlefield. Porus continued commanding from his elephant. He moved along the line, encouraging his soldiers, directing attacks. He refused to retreat. Alexander saw this. He realized Porus was holding the army together. Alexander ordered another cavalry strike. Companion cavalry surged forward. They attacked the weakened flank again. Indian cavalry began retreating. Gaps widened. Alexander pushed harder. His infantry advanced deeper. The elephants, now confused, began losing coordination. Some turned back. Some ran into their own lines. Porus's formation began to break. But the fighting remained intense. Both sides suffered heavy losses. Spears clashed. Soldiers fought in mud. Horses slipped. Elephants roared. The battle turned into chaos. Yet slowly, Alexander gained the advantage. Porus's army began to lose cohesion. The battle between two legendary kings was reaching its climax. Midday, 326 BC. The battle had lasted for hours. The battlefield was now covered in mud, blood, and broken formations. Porus's army, once powerful and disciplined, was beginning to fall apart. The collapse began at the flanks. Alexander's cavalry, faster and more coordinated, continued striking repeatedly. Each charge pushed Porus's cavalry farther back. Indian cavalry tried to regroup, but exhaustion slowed them. Their horses struggled in the mud. Alexander's companion cavalry struck again, and again. Soon, Porus's cavalry began retreating in disorder. This exposed the infantry. At the center, the elephants were becoming uncontrollable, wounded by spears, arrows, and javelins. Some elephants panicked. They turned sideways. Others ran backward. Several charged wildly, trampling their own soldiers. Infantry formations broke. Men scattered. Commanders shouted, but their voices were lost in chaos. Dust mixed with mud. Elephants roared. Soldiers slipped and fell. The once organized Indian army was dissolving. Alexander saw the moment. He ordered a full advance. The Macedonian phalanx moved forward, step by step. Long sarissas pointed ahead. Light infantry followed closely. They targeted isolated groups. Porus's infantry tried to resist. Some fought bravely. Others, exhausted, began retreating. Alexander's cavalry circled the battlefield, cutting off escape routes. Small groups of Indian soldiers were surrounded. Some dropped weapons. Others attempted to flee. The battlefield became a scene of total chaos. Porus tried to hold the line. From atop his elephant, he moved across the battlefield. He raised his spear. He shouted commands. He urged his soldiers to stand. But the army was already breaking. One wing collapsed, then the other. Elephants fled, infantry scattered, cavalry disappeared from the battlefield. Porus now stood near the center, with only a handful of loyal guards, still fighting, still refusing to retreat. Alexander noticed. He admired Porus's determination. Even in defeat, Porus fought like a king. Alexander ordered his men to surround him, but not kill him. Macedonian cavalry slowly closed in. Porus, wounded and exhausted, looked around. His army, gone. His formation, destroyed. The battlefield, lost. Still, he remained upright. Finally, Porus lowered his weapon. The battle was over. Porus was brought before Alexander. Two kings, now face to face. Alexander spoke. "How would you like to be treated?" Porus answered calmly. "Like a king." Alexander smiled. "And anything else?" Porus replied. "Everything is included in that." Alexander admired the courage. He returned Porus's kingdom and granted him more territory. Porus, defeated in battle, now became Alexander's ally. The Battle of the Hydaspes had ended, but the legend of two great kings had just begun.